the whole of my career has been based purely on my ego.
This is Jackie of All Trades, a podcast that explores the multi-creative identity and the rise of the portfolio career among millennials and Gen Z in the creative industries. I'm Keturah, a DJ, creative, strategist, CEO, and self-described Jackie of All Trades with a 10-year portfolio career spanning music, digital marketing, and cultural strategy. On this podcast, I speak to people who have also designed their own careers and are successfully juggling multiple creative pursuits to understand what it takes, what they've learned, and how you can do the same. This season, I'm joined by writer, content creator, podcaster, and author Tolly T, DJ, radio broadcaster, TV presenter, A&R, and music label owner Jam Supernova, journalist, writer, strategist, and director Nati Kasambala, and DJ, writer, artist manager, music label owner, and cultural curator Elijah. This episode is all about Tolly T. You may know her as 1/3 of the Receipts podcast, but she's also a successful writer and a journalist as well. I first worked with Tolly as the social media producer for the Receipts podcast on 1Extra, and as Tolly will tell it, she forced me to be her friend. We're gonna cover a lot on this episode.
Hi, it's me, Tolly Talani, depending how you know me. I am a writer, podcaster, and content creator, I guess. Take me back to the beginning of your journey, how it all began, hobbies, interests, passion, like where did everything start for you? You know what, I started really traditionally, I was went to, obviously we all had to go to secondary school, did primary school to secondary school, did college, I went to uni, and from year 10, I knew I wanted to be a journalist.
Oh, really?
I was one of those really lucky kids. Many people are like, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a journalist. So in year 10, you get work experience. And there was a bunch of work experience, and it was random stuff like working in a mechanic or working in Debenhams. And no one took work experience seriously. So everyone was just no one wanted to go far. So one of the work experiences was to work at Sugar magazine. It was in Marble Arch. And I grew up in Dagenham. I was in secondary school in Dagenham, and nobody was really trying to travel far. Everyone was just literally going to Montfort, going to Barking. And I was like, no, I want to do that. Because I used to read Sugar magazine, and I was like, that would be sick. So I applied for it. I got it. When you're an intern, you don't really get to do it. It's a lot of sorting things out. I remember I used to look up to the editor. I thought she was sick. And then one day she called me into her office and she was like, we want you to write a piece for us. No one on internships ever gets to write anything. I was like, oh my God, I'd love to. And then she was just at the time, Paris Hilton was a proper thing. So she was like, okay, cool. We want you to spend the whole day walking a dog. Because Paris Hilton used to put dogs in her bag. She used to walk around with her dog, blah, blah, blah. And that was my first ever thing that ever got published. Got published into... In the magazine? Yeah, got published into Sugar magazine. And I was just like, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. In my head, every day was going to be an adventure of this, that, and the other. So that cemented it for me. Then from year 10 on, I just did everything I thought you was meant to do to become a journalist. Right. Do you know what I mean? So I studied I studied English, Lit Lang, media and sociology in college. At university, I did media and communications. I did a Sandwich course, which means you take a year out to work. So 6 months in your first year and then another 6 months in your third year. So my degree ended up being 4 years. So my first year work experience at uni, I worked at a PR agency. I was like, let me just see what this is like, right? Let me just try something else. Worked at a PR agency. And I would call journalists to be like, hey, this thing is happening. There's the back in the days where you used to have to call them and people would hang up on me, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I don't want to be the person making the calls. I want to be the person people call.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't want to be the person that's hi. I want to be the one that's no, that's not for us. And so I was like, yeah, cool.
I'll pass.
Yeah. So I was like, definitely has to go into journalism. And then so I left that PR for after a week or two. I was like, yeah, no, it's not for me. I remember there was a tube strike and again, it was in central London and they were like, oh yeah, just get a bus down. And I was like, no.
From where you live?
From where I was in Essex. I was like, I'm not coming. So after that, I just never went back. And then I got another one. This was in music.
Okay.
So again, even though I knew I wanted to be a journalist, I thought, try out different things just to really figure out what it is that you wanted to do. I really wanted to be sure that I didn't miss out or anything. So I started working with I guess a music agency. I don't know what it was at the time. They were looking after J.O.A.T and Devlin.
Okay, like management.
Yeah, asset management. And It's funny, I still know the person now, Colin Betzer. Yeah, and we're still like cool till this day sort of thing. And I wasn't even meant to be working for him, I was meant to be working for someone else, but then he just took a liking to me, so I started working for him. And that was when Gets was called Ghetto.
Right.
So it wasn't Gets, it was Ghetto and it was Devlin. And I remember like really being fond of Devlin because we're both from Dagenham. And it was like, yeah, oh my God, yeah, like getting really good stories from him. And then again, I think...
What was your role there?
I was just helping. Like there wasn't like a role. If they weren't meant to be somewhere, it's like, hey, you have to be here, sending emails, sending CDs out to people, so and like radio station, just like admin type stuff. And I remember like having to contact these guys and they would just not answer their phone calls or just not be at shows that they were meant to be at, or just kind of like living their artist lives, right? So again, my ego, I was like, yeah, I want to be the person someone calls. I feel like the whole of my career has been based purely on my ego.
It's not served you badly, but yeah.
Yeah, it's been purely on like, yeah, no, I don't want to chase people around.
Chase me.
I was like,
I'm the one to be chased.
Yeah, I was like, chase me. But I did that whole work experience out, but then I realised that the music industry was not for me. Because a lot of it is like people management. And I don't think that's a skill that I have necessarily. I'm not like a great people manager. So I was like, yeah, So then my last work experience, I did it in a publishing place. That served me so well. So I remember I started working as a publishing assistant, which I didn't want to do. I was like, so the publishers were downstairs and the journalists were upstairs.
Right.
So I was just like, I have to get upstairs. And I remember one time making a coffee or tea or whatever, and one of the journalists was standing next to me. She was talking. She was like, she needed a taxidermy for a front cover, and she was really stressing herself out. She couldn't find a taxidermy, blah, blah, blah. I remember that day I stayed late and I found a taxidermy to hire. Okay, yeah. And then I took all the details and I put it on her desk the next day. To be like, I found this, blah, 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 if this was helpful. And she was so impressed by me. So she was like, hey, she like took me from the publishing team and was like, she needs an editorial assistant. So I worked with her as an editor assistant, and I did not work on like a big time fancy magazine. It's funny because the magazine was called Fancy. And it was a magazine for a store called Julian and Gray's. Okay. Julian Gray's, which is a store that solely sold nuts. Okay. Like genuinely, they just sold like nuts. that's all they did.
Almond nuts.
No, literally, there's not a thing I don't know about nuts. So that's where, I worked at Fancy magazine and I was the editor assistant there. And then as time went on, I remember she gave me a page that was just dedicated to me. This page was just like, we just wrote about nuts. Like the one page was just about like, we picked a nut every month. I've got every illustration for a nut, like amazing almonds, matching macadamia. Like I just used to bang them out. I used to just write about nuts. I got more pages there. I was writing more things that I wanted to write about, like things I cared about and things like that. So that was like, it was going well. And then I was there for like a couple of years, eventually got made full-time there. Yeah. I remember like getting told that was like my pay was going to be like 18K a year. And I was like, oh my God. What? Yeah. I'm loaded.
Although now thinking about how the hell we live on 18K.
Exactly. I was so excited getting paid 18K a year. I was like, yeah, like big girl. And, I was working every day. I was going in. I was like having ideas and all things like that. And then my editor, like she said that she was going to leave. And in my head, I was like, oh, great, I'm going to get editors. I'm going to get it. Yeah, I'm going to get the role. Of course I'm going to get the role. Why would I not get the role? I've been there from the very beginning of this magazine. I know it. I know it very well. And then I remember they were like, for like 3 months, I was like covering it whilst they were interviewing. And I was like, why the hell are they interviewing? Like,
it's my job.
I'm right here.
Hello.
Yeah, and they just kept interviewing. I remember they interviewed this woman. She came for a couple of weeks, didn't like it, left. So I'm thinking, I was like, these are all signs to say that this job points to me, right? And I'm covering this job now.
Even though they didn't ask you to interview.
Hadn't asked me to interview. I don't even think they even thought of me, to be fair. And I guess it was because I came into the company as an intern.
Right.
And I think there was something about that. I think there was something as if you come somewhere as an intern, they see you on that level. They don't really see your growth there, or you have to be there for years and years for them to see your growth. And then I remember there was someone else that started, and then she left, and I was covering for going on a year, and I was still getting paid my 18K a year. And I was doing the editor's job, and these lot were not going to give me that job.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I'm going to leave.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm going to leave. I've made a promise to myself a while ago. I was like, if I ever find myself crying at a job to do with if I'm like in a disabled toilet crying and I'm crying because of that job, I'm leaving that job.
Oh gosh.
Like, and then I found myself crying because I was like, what am I doing here? Blah, blah, blah. And then that day I was just
out of frustration.
Out of frustration. Yeah.
Being able
so I was
to
like,
get to move up.
Yeah, I'm going to go. there was a job role that came up, and it was for a company called So Feminine, which sounds like a tampon ad, but it was like, it was a UK version of a French company. And the role was beauty and food writer. Finally got that job. And I was there for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I remember at that job, every morning, all of us would like go to Buzzfeed and just like we loved, and that was like peak Buzzfeed days as well. Like
go to
Buzzfeed, the website, because they were doing online so well. Like they were viral all the time. It was just like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. We just used to go on it as like readers and get really fascinated by it and things like that. And then I remember my friend sent me, Buzzfeed was doing internships, and it would just go on. I was just at 25 at the time. And I wasn't doing any more internships. I was like, no more. Like, I've done my fair. I've been working since I was 14. I've been interning and doing all of that since that age as well. So I was like, I'm not interning anymore. Like, if it's not a full-time job, I'm not going to do it. So I didn't apply for it. And then I saw a full-time role come up.
As a writer?
As a writer at Buzzfeed. It was a beauty writer, but beauty and lifestyle. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to apply for this. And it genuinely was the longest process ever. You had to write like 2 articles, do an interview in person, an interview on the phone with someone in America, blah, 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 blah. It was just so long. And I remember, so I used to have to get off at Oxford Street for my So Feminine job. And it was the same station to do my interviews at Buzzfeed Days. I always think, God, I really hope nobody sees me at this station. So like I applied for that. And I remember when I got told I got it, because do you know normally, like when you get an email, I always assume I didn't get a job and I got an email, because normally they call you saying you got a job.
Yeah.
So they'd emailed me, and that email was sitting in my ear. I was like, I'm not opening this because I didn't get it, so I'm not going to open this. And I opened it like 2 weeks later, and it said you'd got the job. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was on holiday. Like, I was just like, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 blah. And I remember even when I told my editor at So Feminine that I was leaving, and she was so happy for me. Because it was like, everybody wanted to work at Buzzfeed in that place. Like, everybody was so gassed about it. Like, it was just like, that was the peak of where you wanted to be at that time. And genuinely, the first year there was the best job I'd ever had.
Really?
It was amazing. It was everything you thought Buzzfeed was, like free food, just like creative license to kind of write whatever it is that you wanted to do. And I had rankings so much more on the outside world. People that I used to email before that used to ignore me now saw my Buzzfeed signature, and I was a thing. And like Buzzfeed and those kind of workplaces, they have a really good way of making you feel like you're a part of this family.
Right.
So you feel so proud to work there, right? You feel so proud to work there. You feel like you're part of the family. You see like what it gets you on the outside world. What it also does is that it makes you feel like you can never go.
Yep.
Because it's like, who am I if I don't have this name? Who am I if I don't have this status of being like, I work at Buzzfeed and that's what my whole thing is. And I made amazing friends at Buzzfeed, friends I'm still friends with like till this day as well. And it just got to a point, again, I was crying in the disabled toilet.
Is it because there's more space in the disabled toilet?
Yeah, you know, like the other people won't hear you. Like it's just an isolated toilet, isn't it? Yeah. I was crying in the disabled toilet. And I was like, no. I'm done here. Yeah. And at the time, I'd started the podcast whilst I was still there.
Okay.
I started the podcast and I was just like, I'm not happy here anymore. Like, I'm not growing. I've done everything I can do.
What was the significant thing? Like, what happened?
So what happened was, again, like I was in this position for a very long time. And I remember like there was a position that came up that was like an editor, like a higher role. And I went to go apply for it. And I remember sitting in the meeting with like the head at the time. And then she was like, but you know, you being like a woman, black and young, do you think people take you seriously as a manager? And I was like, yo. Yeah, it was like, yo. Like, and I really regret never telling her about herself. And I just kind of was like, well, yeah, like answered the question like it was a normal question to answer.
You're stunned in the moment.
Yeah, and it really pisses me off till this day that I never was like, sorry, what are you saying?
So you left Buzzfeed. What did you do? Like contacts? Like what was your plan? Like who did you
left
reach out
Buzzfeed
to?
and then just reached out to everywhere. Like, hey, I'm like available for work and blah 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 blah. Again, the podcast was going on at this point.
But even that, how did you find that? Because we've already established you don't want to be the person who calls people like
exactly.
I need you.
But that's just where I was.
Okay,
it's just where I
suck it up.
was. And thankfully, I'd like had a bit of a following on Twitter, and like the Buzzfeed name doesn't. It helps to say you worked at Buzzfeed, right?
Of course.
But this whole time I was still applying for full-time jobs.
So you wanted to,
I was still applying,
and
like,
your aspiration was still to be an editor.
I was like, I'm still gonna get a full-time job. Like, I didn't think I was gonna be like, I'm just gonna leave and just be a freelancer. And I was like, no, I was applying for every job. So then I remember there was like a freelance gig. I think someone tweeted it. It was for a marketing company, and they just needed a creative.
Right.
They didn't say what it was. They needed a creative.
That was that term. That was that time when creative just
creative to do something. So I was just like, cool, I just applied for it. And luckily, the guy just liked me. This guy called James, who's still very cool to this day. And he just like, he got me to come in. And at the top, the creative, which I didn't realise what the job was going to be for, was for a creative for a marketing campaign for the Met Police. And I remember being in a meeting once, and I was just like,
what am I doing?
Like, what are you actually doing? But you just like eat up in it. I was like, you need to make money. And also, I remember because when I first got that job, the man James had asked me, was like, what's your daily rate? I'm new to freelancing, so I'm like, okay, if I got paid £50 from journalism, let me say 150. Because I thought I was being so cheeky. I was like, 150. I remember he called me to the side. He was like, that's not enough.
Bless him.
Yeah, which is so nice. Like, because he could have just swindled me. And I would have thought I was raking it in. I'm like, my God, yes, 150. He was like, here's what you need to charge. So he told me what to charge. And I think it was like, he doubled it to like 300. So it was like, that's nothing. But I'm thinking like, I didn't realise marketing and journalism money are completely different.
Right.
So yeah, so I did that for like a good couple of months. The campaign kind of didn't go. And the campaign was finished and my time as a freelancer there was like, as a freelancer, once they're done with you, they're kind of like, okay, cool, thank you very much. And then I remember he was just like, before I was going, he was like, do you watch Top Boy? Did you ever watch Top Boy when it was out? I was like, yeah. I was like, I love that show. That was sick, blah, 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 blah. He was like, well, we're pitching for it. He was like, would you be interested? I was like absolutely, I would definitely be interested. So then that kept me on the agency a bit longer, and we're doing the whole like pitching for it and things like that. Obviously, we really wanted it, but then it was Top Boy. We knew like it was like bare agencies were going to be like competitive for this. And I remember I've got this big thing where I don't work on my birthdays. It's just a thing. And I remember the day we had to pitch for it was my birthday. And I was like, coming in, don't you worry.
I'll be there.
Yeah, I'll be there. So I'd come in, like, pitched for it, and I fought for my life at that pitch. Like, I just kind of like that charisma and all of that. And they got it. We got it, which was sick. Like, we got a part of it, and that was like, okay, cool. So that kind of like cemented me now as a creative, because I'm working on this like big campaign. And it was interesting because it was like, to come up with ideas, but not have to be like the face of anything, not have to actually do anything or write anything. I was just the face of it. But then obviously my writing skills came to help, because then we did like a mini film that kind of went out before, and I wrote it.
Where did this film first appear?
Well, the first appeared at Drake's concert.
Right.
Yes, Drake's concert.
Casual.
And I love Drake. Like, I'm absolutely... So that was like an icing on the cake for me. And it was such a big moment for me, just to be able to like be a thing in this space. So I love podcasts. Like, generally, I think because it rides the line of like storytelling. Storytelling is always a thing for me. And I think it just rides that line really, really well. And I was obsessed with a podcast called Serial.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That got me into podcasting, actually.
Yeah, that's
Serial
what got me into podcasting.
podcasts.
And I thought it was so sick how like, I felt like they were in my head. I put a tweet out, I was just like, I've got a podcast name, I Just Need Girls, because I didn't want to do it with my friends.
Why?
Because I think storytelling is capped when you're talking to your friends. Because for a lot of the experiences, they were there for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, loads of girls replied to it, and I like DM'd a bunch of the girls like, yo, I'm actually serious, like send me your emails. Yeah, I was like, yo, okay, give me your number. I started a group chat, and I was like, okay, let's all meet up. At this point, there was like 5 people that were like left and interested.
Did you have like a fully formed idea for like how many people you wanted to be involved, like how frequently it was
generally
going to
not at all. Like, I didn't have a plan, nothing. I just thought, let's just see if it's something that can be done. And we all met up, and like we were chatting for absolutely ages. What was meant to be like a quick little meet up, we were just chatting there for ages. And the group chat was popping. We talked every day. And again, it was just the whole thing of like, not knowing people and then telling them like this happened to me and I'm this person and blah 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 blah, and having to like be curious not only about them but about yourself. And I think often when you're with people that you know, you're not that curious anymore because you know, I know you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I know you, so the curiosity dies a little bit. So there was just like this really fresh sense of curiosity from everybody.
But you just feeling people out in terms of who you want to do this with, or
at that point it was 5 people. I was like, oh fine, we'll do 5 people.
Right.
And then someone had like dropped out because she was a musician and wanted to concentrate more on her music, so it was absolutely fine. And then we did 4. So there was 4 of us for about 2.5 years. And then Phoebe was just like, I think the bigger we got, she just realised it wasn't for her.
Right.
Yeah, like she's not a natural sharer.
Okay.
And I just think the bigger it got, it just kind of just felt like this is a lot. Because for the longest time, we didn't have our faces anywhere. Audio only. Like we didn't have, none of us really had like a massive following on like Instagram or anything. People had to like go out of their way to look for us.
Yeah.
And all this time I'm still like finger on the pulse of podcasting, what's happening, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. We weren't making any money. In fact, we were paying for all our recording sessions. But again, I work in media, right? So I'm like getting it into magazines. I'm like, you know, like Buzzfeed put it out there. I'm talking, I'm asking favours. I'm like, yeah, I do this thing. Like people are like spreading the word a bit, which is like really helpful. Anything that we can get, I'm trying to get it. I'm just trying to be like,
figure out avenues to make money necessarily yet, but you know, you just want to.
I just wanted it to be. I didn't know how it made money.
Right.
Like, because at the point, I don't think anyone knew how podcasting made money. There was still kind of this thing. Yeah. So I had no idea how. And none of us knew how we were going to make money at the time. We were just like, we'll do live shows, and then we started getting approached by loads of people, right? That's the thing, right? If you do a good enough job, people come to you. So, and we were lucky that we came at a stage where there wasn't many people. I feel like timing was so... I think we got the combination of a job well done, timing and luck. It was just very good timing, right? We just filled a spot that was missing. So we're having people, like we're having brands and like get in touch with us, do you want to do this, do you want to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then we started doing the BBC with you. And so we did like a couple of episodes for the BBC, I think like 2 seasons or something. And it was great. Like again, like it was a way we were making money.
Yes,
for the podcast. Because we hadn't been getting paid for the podcast. But just because of how the BBC is, it was quite, BBC is taxpayers' money. They have to do things according to what taxpayers want, right? So I find it quite stifling, should I say? There's lots of edits that had to be done, and that's why we were, even when we're doing the BBC, we're still doing ours. So the BBC thing was like, we were doing that, it was fine, it was like a great opportunity, and it was great because I got to meet you, got to meet Renee, and Renee has been, I'd always give a shout out to that woman because from the very beginning of the podcast, she reached out to us and to be like, hey, let's just chat about things that I can help you with in this space, because she was of the audio space. She was the one that gave us the idea of having a Your Receipts. So she just kind of like helped us out for free, like just free advice. Here's this thing that you could do, like go with it. So we're really big on anytime we get an opportunity, and we always want to hire Black women. That's always been like a thing for us to be like, oh, there's this gig. Okay, cool. Can we get this person to work on it? Yeah. That's just always been like, if we have the opportunity to hire, we'll always try to do that. And so then I remember someone had got, again, I was following like loads of podcasting people, and I'd seen that someone had got a new job at Spotify. And it was like a podcast job. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And before that, there's loads of news about like Joe Budden signing Spotify. There was just like, I was like, okay, cool, these lot are doing anything. But there wasn't anything in the UK that had been announced, that had been said or anything like that. So then I remember going in, like DMing her, being like, congratulations on your new role, like I do this podcast. And then she was like, yeah, sure, cool. And I remember the first meeting, Renee actually came with me. And we were just like chatting about other things or whatever. And then I was just like, oh, it's interesting, like what you guys are doing with the whole, like, you know, like exclusives, blah, 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 blah. And then she was like, would you guys be interested? I was like, yeah. And then that's how that kind of came about. We did like meetings and just like went back and forth, blah, 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 blah. And it just, it just made sense. And because there was so much more, just by virtue of what Spotify is, we can say whatever the hell we want. Like genuinely, there's not a single thing we've ever been like, oh, careful, like ever. They're just more like, it's like a cooler space. It's an independent company. It's not like taxpayers company. They don't have to have anything. It's the same space that hosts Joe Rogan. They can't tell us to not say something. And when someone like that is on it as well. And not that we don't say anything wild, but there is that's one thing I'm always so precious about what we can say. Yeah. if I'm ever in a space where I feel like we can't say, I don't enjoy it.
Yeah. Need to be able to speak
Yeah,
freely.
I'm just like, well, there's no point then if we have to be so careful about what we can say and all of that. So, yeah, that's how the Spotify, and which was great because it was like, we're now getting paid.
I love how Tolly tried a hand at so many different things, and I think this is super key to figuring out the mix of your portfolio career. In the next episode, we'll be speaking to all of our guests and we'll talk about the role of technology and the internet, career-defining moments, what connects the dots between all of their creative pursuits, and the implications when one of your creative pursuits makes more or less money than the others. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at JOATpodcastUK for extra content. And if you ever want to switch it up, you can always listen to these episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.